Okay, hello. Some of y'all in the room I've already said hello to, but now we're recording. And so for all of you wonderful people that may be tuning into this later, hello to you too. So I am Joshua Gonzalez. We are doing just a little bit of a webinar tonight, talking about some housing related things. And so let me get my share screen going here and we can start. Let me see. I feel like it's actually been a while since I've done this because we've been doing a lot of in-person things. That's ready. Thank you for your patience. Okay. Oh, actually, let me make sure because Zoom does that thing where you have to make sure you include the sound, right? There we go. Yeah. Share sound. Okay. Okay. All right. Now, got this going. I am going to do presenter view. And I believe now y'all have a pretty unobstructed view of the slide, it looks like. So, okay, cool. All right, so this is Community Plans 101. I actually wasn't sure if I should call it community planning or what. I don't know, but it's about community plans, and it is a 101. It is a beginner course on what community plans are. Okay, so I am Joshua Gonzalez. I am the a rep of and the education director at Abundant Housing LA. I'm education and events director. I'm a Los Angeles resident in the Pico Union neighborhood. That is really close to downtown, sort of like on the outskirts of downtown. So I like to say I live between the Staples Center and USC, kind of like equidistant between those. So that's where I'm at. That is my area is because this is relevant today. My area is covered by the Westlake community plan. So that's just something to share. Abundant Housing LA often goes by AHLA, so just making sure that that is clear. And what is AHLA? What do we do? What is that? Well, AHLA is a grassroots nonprofit organization working to solve Southern California's housing crisis by advocating for more housing at all levels of affordability. We are composed of community members whose primary interest is making housing more affordable. We envision Los Angeles County as a place where every resident can find an affordable home that meets their needs in their neighborhood of their choice. So we aspire to create sustainable and diverse communities that prioritize accessibility, minimize car dependency, and foster a healthier and more inclusive environment for all. Right? We want everyone, all of us at Los Angelinos and beyond, to live and be comfortable. Right? So, as we are talking about housing and land use things, it's important for us to do a land acknowledgement to acknowledge that we are on unceded territory. So Abundant Housing LA recognizes and acknowledges the first people of this ancestral and unceded territory. It belonged to the Gabrielino Tongva peoples, and the land is now occupied, at least where I live, by State Senate District 26. And so that is we acknowledge and honor indigenous folks, elders past and present, and their descendants. We recognize that the Tongva peoples are still here and are committed to lifting up their stories, culture, and community. The first people of this nation ensured every member of the community had a home. We share a fundamental human responsibility to ensure that as the people who came after, we can say the same. And that's sort of where we'll start with today's narrative, if you will. Our agenda here is that we're going to talk about what is a community plan. We're going to talk about the components of the community plan. We'll talk a little bit about the process. how that is related to zoning and how you can participate. The goal today is to understand the community plan enough to read and analyze with the purpose of meeting your community's needs. And we can talk more about what that means. So, just to get us started, we'll likely talk about all of this stuff in deeper, conversation and later in the presentation. But I thought that this would be a good way just to get us primed. Excuse me, get us primed and ready to go for the things to come. So this is a great video made by the city.
Hi all, Lulu and Derby here to answer questions about what is a community plan.
Hi everyone.
Hey Derby, think about Los Angeles 30 years ago. I'm sure you noticed that our city is changing.
Yeah, it's changed so much. There are more people, it's less smoggy, and we have a lot more metro options.
That's right. Now think about the next 30 years. What do you want your city to look like for your kids, for your grandkids?
Well, I hope my kids could still live in LA, close to their jobs, parks, and hopefully close to me.
Okay, well let me tell you about the community plans. The city's 35 community plans are part of the city's general plan, which envision how our different communities will develop over time. Each plan lays out goals, policies, and programs for land use.
Can you explain the difference between them?
I'll break it down. Each community plan has goals, which describe what we want our community to look like. An example of a goal is having adequate housing for everyone.
That sounds like a good goal to have.
And policies, they guide how to achieve those goals. For example, by encouraging senior housing and housing for families.
Goals and policies sound like good ideas, but how do we achieve them?
Well, Derby, programs are one of the ways to help implement goals and policies. An example of a program could be to explore some real-world strategies to make housing easier to build.
That sounds great. Finding housing is tough nowadays.
Another way to implement goals and policies is through a community plan's land use map, which identifies the future mix of land uses that tie in with a plan's goals and policies. For example, this map here shows where low-scale houses will be, where larger-scale apartments will be, and where stores and businesses will be.
Okay, but do the community plans actually build these things?
The plans just provide the guidance and rules. You see, the plans help the city determine whether new developments proposed by landowners or land developers are consistent with the community's vision. The plans also help with the application of zoning, which outlines specific rules about what can be built on each piece of land.
Okay, so that's just to get us going, right? So you get the sort of idea. So let's dive deep into it a little bit. So again, sort of like what that thing suggested, that video suggested, is that community plans do a lot of things. They establish goals and objectives for the community. There's a policy document that we'll learn a little bit more about that talks about those things. It guides land use decisions. So that means like what kind of housing can be built here? What kind of commercial properties can be built here? Lots of different things about how we actually utilize the land that's around us. And very similar and as a part of that are, development standards. It promotes public health, safety, and welfare. It's everything about your neighborhood that needs to be thought of in order for it to develop and grow, right? And not run stagnant and not fall into disrepair sometimes, right? These are the things that you want the community plan to do. So let's talk about the components of said community plans. So it's very interesting because the community plan is very much like one of those Russian dolls. Like it's sort of like a plan within a plan within a plan sort of thing. And so I'm going to start sort of just broad and just briefly show you how we end up at the community plan, right? So like I said, Russian doll, right? Now, the city and the county really at every level of like government sort of has this general plan. And a general plan is the comprehensive long-term policy document that guides the future development and growth of the entire city. It serves as a blueprint for how the city will evolve over time, and it addresses a wide range of issues related to land use. And so it has all of these separate elements, the general plan, right? So, for instance, there's mobility, there's infrastructure systems, there's conservation, there's air quality, there's noise, there's open space, there's safety, there's health, there's public facilities and services, and then there's a housing element. Hey, which if you've been a housing advocate for, over the past like year or so, you probably know her. Housing element is someone who we know, right? So we've been really like doing a lot of work around that. But if you're not, that's okay. If you don't know. And then the last one that we'll talk about today is the land use element. This is where the community plans live, okay, in the land use element. So what you may have remember seeing in the video was that the land use element is a broad, comprehensive framework that guides the physical development of the land across the entire city, right? So the land use is focused on the overall spatial organization of the city, balancing different land uses to promote economic vitality, environmental quality, and social equity. So altogether, the 35 community plans of Los Angeles make up this general plan's land use element. Again, they do that to bolster housing and job opportunities, conserve open space, natural resources, so on and so forth. So the community plan establishes these neighborhood-specific goals and implementation strategies to achieve the broad objectives laid out in the city's general plan. And so that is to say that, again, like the video said, the community plan doesn't actually build the stuff. It's really just like a guide for how things can and could be built in various parts of the city, right? So, the community plan again has these standard components. There is a policy document, and then part of the policy document is, which you may remember from the video, goals, policies, and programs, right? So for the purposes of this webinar, I am using actual screenshots from the West Side community plan. It's been through an update process through this year, and we're looking at a draft. It's not the final, but it is the draft. And more specifically, and hopefully, we're not going to get into this because complicated. But the West Los Angeles community plan is actually split up into 4 other sub community plans. That can happen. We're not going to get into that right now, but just so you know, a little nugget of information. And so the one that we are looking at is actually the Palms Mar Vista Del Rey community plan. And so again, everyone consists of a policy document, and and as far as goals and policies, they are aspirations for the community. A goal is a statement that describes a sort of desired future condition or like an end state. So it's very much like, yes, we want housing for everybody. Okay, so that's like a goal, right? So then what it lists under that are policies that will work toward that goal. So you'll see here in this first example, it's goal LU1, a land use 1. It's a sustainable, innovative, and diversified Palms Mar Vista Del Rey that offers a full range of opportunities and experiences for all. And then this is only a couple of them. There are many, but a couple of these sub points here are the policies. Foster an equitable and inclusive Palms Mar Vista Del Rey with housing options that can accommodate the fullest range of economic and social needs. And then there's a second one. And that's sort of how these policy documents work. They list these goals, like this one here, safe, healthy, and high quality residential environments that provide housing for all segments of the community, right? And then there are the same things, policies underneath that work toward that goal. So I have these 3 goals here, but there are actually a lot. a lot for different reasons as well. So there is another goal that says their goal is to have access to safe, affordable housing and services for people experiencing or at risk of experiencing homelessness. Great goal, right? And then sort of where the meat of that matters is what are the policies, and then further on, what are the programs that are going to do that, right? But there are so many goals and policies. There are goals from just housing and livable communities to commercial corridors and centers, jobs and economic development, even urban form, which is a set of goals and rules that actually talk about how things in that city are placed, what they look like, things like that. And so there are a ton of these goals. And I really want to make sure that you understand that, because this is no sort of like small ambition to go through and like read and analyze this stuff, right? Like I did this with the intention of learning about community plans and then like sharing my findings, right? And it turns out that like even in an updated community plan, there are tons of goals. And it's frustrating because they can actually contradict each other. So anyway, the point is that there are a lot of these goals. And then uh the next important part is the implementation program, right? So we have these goals, we have these policies that will support these goals, but we need programs to actually put those policies into action, right? To actually meet the goal. This is an example of one. These are programs that actually already exist. And so that is something that you will find in these community plans, right? You will find ones that already exist but are, you know, going toward in progress, and go toward the achievement of some of the goals that they've laid out. And so here you'll look at like there's a Green New Deal, sustainable city thing, you know, improving environment, economy, and health of communities. There's a measure JJJ thing, which if you're not sure about that, we have a Housing 101 coming up where that'll come up. So I encourage everyone to attend that as well. But these are programs that already exist that are meant to meet these land use goals, specifically these land use and urban form goals. Um, there are new programs, proposed programs, and these are some of them, right? To hopefully remove oil wells from, you know, residential neighborhoods, making sure there's housing for multi-generational families and households, making sure there is supportive housing, making sure there is a comprehensive tenant's right of return, things like that. Using vacant lots to do residential and commercial land development, using infill housing, things like that. If some of these words or terms are not that clear, like that's okay. We have another thing going on where we'll talk a lot about that. But these are all good things, right? These are all like supporting the health of the residents, making sure that they have access to affordable and safe housing. And these are good things, right? So the other thing that the community plan should have is a land use map. And that is actually going to show it's going to identify where certain uses are permitted, right? So there's residential uses, there's commercial uses, and there's industrial uses. And then there's other things like green space and, you know, public facilities and things like that. But those are the sort of like three big of land use designation, is what they're referred to as. So together, you'll see that it actually shows you like what resources are near, where they are, and then it also tells you gives you a key here to tell you what these colors mean. What you'll see usually for housing is the sort of peachish color that says medium neighborhood residential. That through through like low residential on the other side is housing, right? And then there's industrial, which like has factories, things like that. And so that's important to know because so take a look at that again, and you'll notice that um there's all that yellow space. And what we just saw was that that yellow space was low residential. What that means is that there is a low density there that's allowed. And so that's sort of a broad land designation use way of saying that there are only single family homes permitted there, right? And so that's just a fact. There's no judgment about that at this point. This is just showing like what you'd be looking at if you were looking at the community plan. Okay, so and so it's important to know that because um usually changes to the city zoning are initiated through the community plan updates. And so what we talk about as a housing organization is that we want housing at all levels of affordability and in high opportunity areas. And so that means that we have to change policies or attempt to change policies that would be a barrier to us having an abundance of housing, right? So I also just want to quickly let you know that we are focusing on the land use portion of community plans right now. There are also other sections. That West Side sub community plan also has mobile and connectivity law or goals and policies and strategies, and also public realm and open space goals, policies, and programs, right? It has all of those things too. Now, it's really important. We're focusing on the land use because that is sort of like the best place to start here, right? With the purpose of being a pro housing advocate, which I hope you'll be if you're not already one. But what's important to know is that, as I said before, these goals and strategies can actually contradict one another. Um, and so it's important to realize that the actual decision makers have to strike a balance based on like severity of an issue, priority, and the community plan like the updates are not static, right? They're not like concrete. So it's important that like if we realize that the neighborhood has this severe need for something, whether it's more housing, whether it's a park, whether it's like better environmental standards, like things like that, you don't necessarily have to wait for a particular time, right? So like there's like a sort of housing element update season that happens every 8 years. Community plans are not like that. They kind of have a rolling update process. So they're not like all happening at once. And even if there is a plan that is adopted, right, that is drafted and approved and adopted, you can still give your feedback to let them know that something else needs to change, right? That there is still a neighborhood need that is not being met. And so it's really important to recognize that because even we as advocates, the decision makers have to strike that balance. And what I'm trying to say is that sometimes a goal may not be able to be met because it contradicts another goal. And so that's something that decision makers have to look for in community plans, and something that as advocates, if we have the time and the energy and the space, that's something we'll want to look for too, because then it requires being creative. How can we then maybe help everyone get closer to everyone getting what they want, right? So these are some of the mobile and connectivity goals and policies. A West Side circulation system that basically make sure that people can get in and out. And here are some public realm and open space goals and policies. And you'll see that that's really about like making sure that there are community spaces, park facilities, things like that that will serve the neighborhood, right? So let's take a moment to talk about what the actual planning process is. We've looked at the components of the community plan, which include the land use, or sorry, the policy document, which has all the goals, policies, and programs, right? And then there's the land use map that actually shows the land use designation, right? So what areas in your neighborhood can be used for what kind of thing, residential, commercial, or industrial. All right. So now let's look at the process. How do we even get to that point? Right? Like how does a community plan even like get made? How is there a draft for me to take screenshots of to show you guys? So this is a whole process starting with initiation and scoping. And so what this is the process begins with the identification of a need to update or create a community plan. In some cases where a community plan already exists, it might state that, oh, in year 2035, we are going to review and update the plan. So that's part of what contributes to how it is a rolling process, that not all community plans are being updated at the same time, right? So if they find that there is a need to create or update a plan, this could be because of the age of the existing plan or significant changes to the community, new goals, things like that, right? So the city planning department, in consultation with elected officials and stakeholders, define the scope of the plan update, and this involves determining the geographical boundaries, really all of this, sort of technical stuff, right? But after that, once they have got to that point and they have a timeline for the process, then they start listening to the community. There's a whole community engagement portion of this where they are do public meetings, workshops, surveys, focus groups, online platforms, lots of things for the communities to be able to get involved and make sure that their sort of needs are being heard, right? So that way the city is being developed and growing in a way, or the neighborhood, I should say, but the city overall is being developed and growing in a way that meets everyone's needs. So then they will go through and create a vision, all right? So we take that feedback, we go like, okay, so given all of this stuff, what do we sort of like imagine that this neighborhood could look like with all of that stuff? And they think about that, they create some lofty goals, probably stuff that ends up being the aspirations of the policy document, right? So then they write out the plan and they do like the stuff that they actually produce the stuff that I was showing you in the screenshots, right? Then they'll check for environmental impacts because that is something you have to do, right? So if they're making any kind of changes to the land use of the city, of the neighborhood, then we have to look at, well, how is that going to affect the environment? Is it going to create more pollution? Is it going to create, like worse air quality, like things like that? They have to look at that. Then getting feedback after that stuff, after they've incorporated or made amendments to support or change things based on that environmental impact feedback. And then there's a final approval, and then they put the plan into action. And that um, is an important part because obviously all of this stuff is for nothing if we don't do anything with it. But I think that what I really want to get across here is that there are opportunities for public engagement and participation at like almost every other level of this process. I never knew about this. I never knew this was a thing, right? Like before I got into housing, before I started learning about this and sharing my knowledge with other folks, I had no idea that this was like another meeting that we should go to. I'm thinking all we do is go to planning commission and city council meetings and give public comment, which is still something we should do and is super important. But this also is an overarching thing that is happening that is really important for us as community residents, wherever you live, to be a part of. So that way you don't end up feeling some kind of nasty, sour way about your own neighborhood because of the way that it's changed, right? So why does all this matter? Well, land use designations and zoning. That is one of the maybe largest barriers to an abundance of housing, particularly in high resource areas. So we're talking about like holdovers from like redlining days where certain neighborhoods, particularly and maybe most well known as like the coast and the west side, a lot of that area was like green and blue line and is now zoned for a majority of single family homes, which means that apartments, townhomes, other kinds of complexes, duplexes, things like that cannot be built there. And that's an issue because we have a a population that is bursting at the seams, really only because there's not enough housing for everybody. Everyone has to double up. Everyone has to have 10 roommates, so the so that way you can actually afford the rent because rents are skyrocketing high, right? Like most people can't afford this stuff. I don't know how everybody who lives in Los Angeles actually lives in Los Angeles. It's kind of wild. So this is important because this is, as I said before, the community plan process is where a lot of the times zoning changes are initiated. And so if we look at that land use map, let's go back to that community plan use map. This is a broad use map, right, with land use designation uses. Earlier, I mentioned that I want to just reaffirm that this sort of light yellow area here means low, referring to density, residential. And again, that basically means it's an R1 zoned area, which it means that only single family homes can be built there. So I'm not making a judgment about this plan or the area's land use and zoning designations. Instead, I'm just pointing out that reviewing your community plan and analyzing could lead to some amazing pro housing improvements, right? Actually, I have an example of that. Um, not from not from California, but I was doing a little research, seeing like sort of community plan success stories, right? And this came up. And so this is in Georgia. It's the Georgia Department of Community Affairs. And it's a state agency that helps build strong, vibrant communities. It provides services and programs that help local governments create quality communities. These include technical assistance, capacity development, best practice identification, and implementation in areas such as local government planning, incorporating volunteerism, and downtown development, in addition to a lot of other things. But they have this particular program called Plan First. And it's like they are basically undertaking specific projects or community initiatives that are called for in their local plans to actually follow through with like a plan that is meant to improve the neighborhood. And so what you're seeing here in these screenshots are that they decided to redevelop an old shopping center into a mixed-use development, 15-acre thing, behemoth of housing and commercial, right? Of commercial things like little small businesses and things like that. 1,000 new housing units, and near 300 units at another place called Aston City Springs. And there are all these like new businesses that have actually come to be part of the community. Now, look, there's a lot here that probably is not on par with LA's structure and politics, right? But it is proof that residents are essential in affecting the growth and development of the community, right? So then how do you participate? Well, there are so many ways. I was stating that before, that like almost on every other level of the planning process, you have a way of being engaged. So that includes staying informed. There are so many ways to monitor updates. You could keep track of when the plans are being created or updated. You could go to the planning department's website, and you can find a lot of information there. I got all the information I used today from that website. You can also subscribe to alerts in a lot of cases. You could join like a listserv or a newsletter or something like that. And so that's one way, easy way to sort of just keep up with what's going on. You can engage early in that process. So hopefully, if you're staying informed, you'll know that when there are kickoff meetings or scoping sessions, right? Like we talked about earlier, that it starts with initiation and scoping the process. These are all things that will be announced publicly. You just kind of have to know where to look, right? So engaging early is really important because you can maybe join a committee or something like that if you have the time or energy for that. And you can really be a part of that early process so that way, we have that influence in there early and don't necessarily have to go back and wish we had, said this thing or called for this kind of change earlier, right? Um, with that, you can do public input. So there are going to be things after that initiation and scoping phase where you can attend the workshops and public meetings and things like that. You can submit written comments, even on the planning on the West Side Plan website that I was on. It's a draft, right? It's not actually approved, if I understand correctly, but you can still submit stuff. There's a form on there, and it's like, hey, which plan are you talking about? And like, what's your comment or your question? And that's an important thing to do. You can organize and mobilize others. This is for actually from this point on, Abundant Housing LA can help you with this. But you can do this like on your own too. Again, if you have the time and the energy, build coalitions, work with other pro housing folks, your neighbors, your family members, things like that. Get them involved. A united voice can have a stronger impact on the planning process. It really can. Earlier, I mentioned that I thought that it was all about just going and giving public comment at like planning commission meetings or city council meetings. And I have to say that I have seen how powerful that kind of united voice could be at those things, right? Like those things do really well. When there's a lot of pro housers there saying like, yeah, we need more housing. Like it really goes over well a lot of the time. And so the same stands here. Organize and mobilize others. Collaborate with city planners. Again, something that Abundant Housing LA can help you with. We actually met with city planning about the CHIP ordinance. If you don't know about that, I can send you links to that as well. But we did talk to the city planners about that. We met with them in person at a library, and the residents of that neighborhood got to have conversations about that. That's great. Advocate for specific policies. That's something that we do. We even write our own policies. In some cases, we sponsor policies like we are doing now with AB 2667, AB 1335. If you don't know about those, again, I'll send lots of links if you'd like to learn about those things. But those are things that you could do. And then finally, you want to follow the process through to adoption because, like I keep saying, it doesn't matter at really what process the plan is in. There's opportunity for you to give feedback. So if you sort of like, okay, well, it's been finalized and it's been adopted, definitely celebrate if it has stuff in that you like and that is meant to improve your community, but don't stop there because it could be that some change is made while you weren't looking, right? And so follow through to adoption and beyond, and then hold the decision makers accountable. If they say they're going to implement this strategy, this program to meet this great aspiration, this great goal, make sure they're doing that. And you have the right to do that as a resident, right? Like you live in Los Angeles and they are meant to serve us, and we have to treat them like that sometimes because otherwise they might just be kind of lazy. I'm just gonna say it. Okay, just gonna say it. I don't really think that's a hot take, but if it is, go for me. So what kind of things do we have coming up? If you'd like to learn more, we have a Housing 101 on September 12th at this same time and this same place. That is going to be an ultra shortened Housing 101. When I first started here at Abundant Housing LA, the Housing 101 was 2 hours, and it was fantastic. But we know that sometimes people don't have 2 hours. And so, just like tonight, I wanted to do something that is quick gives you the good information that you need, and there's always opportunities for you to learn more at other webinars, other ways, right? So, but we will have a short housing 101 on September 12th. That is a Thursday. It's going to be online on Zoom. We also will have a housing happy hour on September 17th. That is a Tuesday. That is a 2 hour sort of period where we just kind of meet up, usually someplace in downtown LA. If you're around there, we go to a place called Angel City Brewery. It is really close to the Little Tokyo Arts District stop. So if you take public transit, you can take the E line or the A line, and it stops just a block away there. We're also going to be having a packed fundraiser on September 25th. Save these dates. You will see them show up in your inbox if you follow us, or if you are signed up for our newsletter. So just save those dates, and hopefully we'll see you out at some of those events. So, okay, I have talked. Okay, so who has questions? If you have questions, or if you have comments, or if there's something you'd like to explore, please feel free to speak up. Give me one moment though, because I have terrible allergies and I need to get some tissues. Okay. Ugh, I don't think this heat helps. If you're in LA, you know what I'm talking about. It's hot. Okay, so let me stop sharing. Okay, so hi folks. Does anyone have questions? Does anyone have feedback? What do we got? Community plans. Has anyone read a community plan before? Anyone?
Sorry, what was the question?
If anyone has read a community plan before.
Yeah, I haven't worked with that, but as an architectural designer, when I used to work for some boutique offices, and we would do a classic single family home remodel, we would like commonly used the city maps and work with the planning department, so and work with zoning and all that jazz. So basically, inside out, I have a very good exposure to what's the zoning like in LA, in the county and beyond. And
Yeah,
it's
that would
it's a
be
bit
the
of a
place to
set.
see that.
Yeah, it's a bit of a sad picture,
Yeah.
what the zoning looks like at this moment, but I'm quite hopeful that the what needs to be done will be done, because of thanks to this kind of meetings and talks, people are talking about that. There's a lot of motion happening in the society. People understand that it's just the way it is. It's not gonna work, and the changes has to come to the system. So I'm kind of hopeful, more kind of hopeful to see those reforms done in the zoning.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, me too. Because that is, like I said in the little presentation, like that is, I can't say this like because I'm not sure of the data, but I'm fairly certain it's one of the biggest barriers to like us having enough housing for everybody. Because we just
Yeah.
can't, there aren't other safe areas to develop it, right? Because the whole problem is that we have been subject to suburban sprawl over the past, like, I don't know, 100 years, 100 or so years
The
almost.
past 70 years, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, like, we're now, that's why we're having like such an issue with the fires and like people losing their homes. And it gets even deeper than that with like insurance,
Yeah.
pulling out of the state and not wanting to give people plans anymore because they're like, no, you live in that fire area. Like,
Yeah.
so that
Yeah.
that just it's actually just negatively affecting us on so many levels.
It's just one big like that loop,
Yeah,
that it's like one chain that has to be broken and redone. And zoning is one of the first measures that city needs to take action on.
yeah.
Because just today I was watching this video about, I'm sorry if anyone has questions, just like feel free to cut me off. I'm just I can go on and on this topic because this is just basically my what I'm brewing in every day in. Because just today I just watched this interview on California Insider on how ADU boom impacts the economy and California in general. And they're both good and bad deeds about ADU. It's like a really good temporary remedy for the housing crisis, but it's definitely not a solution to the problem because it's basically we continue the urban sprawl because instead of building small single family homes, we're building a mini single family
Right.
home. Just being like building them on top of another. It's not gonna help the it will just slightly give this like very short-term remedy for the current needs of people, but it's not for the long run. It had to be, mid density, mixed use development, mixed zone development. This, divide and conquer type of zoning, this area
Yeah.
is only for R1, this area is only for, some others. It's not sustainable,
Yeah. You're right. Exactly. It's not sustainable. It's
Yeah.
not sustainable at all. Let me just look at the. Okay, Miriam says I have read the Northeast LA Community Plan. Okay, Miriam, can you tell us a little about that? Like a little bit about your experience with that?
Hi, yes, more like I skimmed through it.
Fair,
But it
fair.
was still, yeah, they're really long. The Northeast LA Community Plan was like over like 70 pages. They're super long, and the text is super dense too. So I think that like that's an issue too for like communities to like be able to understand these plans and how to be able to like influence them and they have their input included. But it was definitely very interesting to see like how yeah, like the goals, like how you explain like the policies and how like at least the Northeast LA Community Plan, I think it's like so outdated, like from the 90s, I think, or I don't know,
Yeah,
something like that, 2000. So like some of these plans do need to be updated. And yeah, like I didn't even know that community plans existed. And I didn't know about like the huge impact it has on like communities. So yeah, it was very interesting for me to like look into it. Yeah.
cool. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And yeah, like it's some of I think mine because at the beginning of this I said that I live in the Pico Union neighborhood and I am part of the Westlake community plan. And I actually think that it's due for an update soon, but when I looked up mine, the last time it was updated was like 1998 or something like that. And
Yes.
even though sometimes the 90s feels like just 10 years ago, I guess, like it's not. It was like a long time ago. So like especially with the way things are happening here in this neighborhood because Pico Union was in the LA Times and cited for being overcrowded during the pandemic. So like obviously if you live in close quarters, like it was easier to sort of like spread COVID-19 and things like that. And so like that is how it is here. And so there's like things that have to change so that way we don't have to live so tightly, like in like a sardine can with each other. You know what I mean? So there's
Yeah.
lots of reasons that there needs to be more
Also, I
housing.
wanted to mention that I also like for because I go to UCLA and my supervisor was doing research on like housing elements, and so she had me like look at all the housing elements in LA, and I also noticed that like some housing elements are not even like you're not allowed to view them like on the internet, like the website like crashes.
Oh, interesting. Really?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm wondering if it's the same thing for community plans that like some like city, some neighborhood um community plans maybe like there's like a failed like the link doesn't work.
Interesting. Yeah, that's troublesome. Because that really it inhibits our ability to participate, right? And that's an issue. There's already a sort of like uneven sort of use of like very technical terms and things like that. The language, like Miriam, you were saying that it's very dense. And that is so true with a lot of housing stuff, right? Like it's very technical. There's a lot of like acronyms and there's a lot of like words and things like that. And like sometimes it's like, hey, even if I really care, like, I'm sure there's a lot of people that are like, I really care about this, but also like I don't have time in my day to sit and learn all of that. Right?
And completely inaccessible to the masses.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. And so like that's like something personally that drives me is that like I'm not just like picking out the technical terms and throwing them at you. Like I'm actually showing like what it looked like to someone who had time and and like had looked everything up, right? Like sharing my findings, like I said. And so I hope that the stuff that I talked about today was easily understood. And if not, like that's okay too. Like reach out to me. You can reach me at Joshua at abundanthousingla.com or not .com, excuse me, don't do that. Abundanthousingla.org. Or you can also just wait for a follow-up email from me. I will be sending stuff. I'll try to go back and go through the presentation to remember everything I said I would send I would send links for. And so but yeah, that will keep us connected. And thank you all so much for being here tonight. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your engagement. And I'm really looking forward to doing more housing stuff with you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for this little webinar. That was really nice.
Cool,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah, the discussions are very important.
Yeah, absolutely,
Thank
absolutely.
you.
Yeah, you got it. All right, thank y'all. To you watching in the future, watching this recording, this is what public participation can look like. So, join us at Abundant Housing LA in learning this sort of stuff from the ground up. We have lots of 101 type stuff, and then we're actually working on stuff that will let you dive a little bit deeper into some of this stuff if you really want to know all of the cool language and all of that fancy stuff. But what we find most important is that we advocate for more housing at all levels of affordability. That means that land use and zoning in Los Angeles has to change. That has to change if we want housing for everyone. So remember that, take that with you wherever you go, and have a fantastic day, night, whatever it is for you right now as you're watching, and have a fantastic evening to those of you that are here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a lovely rest of your day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.